What's going on, everybody? It's Rick. This is the natural bedding bin, and we're going to hop in, check out the last feeding, and then get it fed again. Okay, so if you can see, that's dried out nicely. Look at that, loaded with worms. They really do seem to enjoy the moisture and like the brown paper bag. Hopefully you can see that swollen clitellum. So that's a little pregnant worm. I added a bunch of fresh bedding for that last feeding. Here's something. I don't know what it is, though. I know this is, or should be, something with the comfrey. Well, I went ahead and added some coffee grounds to this. So I was just kind of seeing, like this here's coffee grounds. Move some of the more done kind of in between, because the other feeding, I ended up topping it off with more fresh bedding right along that side, so now I get to kind of incorporate that into this side where the feedings are going to be. Very happy to see how the worms have been doing. As of that last feeding, there was a chunk of onion, and I'm not seeing any of that anymore. Still have a couple of the pieces of the cobs, and this is very soft. So probably for the next check-in, which should be in 2, maybe 3 weeks, I don't foresee really seeing any more of the cobs, because they are finally to the point where they're breaking down and getting soft. With the feeding, I'm going to go ahead and give them this watermelon, and there is a bunch of juice in there. I have the celery that I actually gave the other half to the Vermihut for the last feeding. I have blueberries that went bad, and I'll give a few more of the stalks of the comfrey. I harvested the comfrey, I guess now it's been maybe 3-4 weeks ago, and I put some in the freezer. So for me, that's one of the better ways, because it basically, when you freeze an item, it bursts all the little cell walls, and then it makes it a lot easier for the worms to get to it and break down the food scraps. To the feeding area, I'm going to add coffee. It's from the K-cups. We just go ahead and take the little round cup, pop the foil, and dump the coffee grounds right into a little bowl. Coffee grounds and the green material can actually heat up, but what's great is you see this bin's large enough for the worms to kind of travel throughout the bin, so it shouldn't be an issue with the worms getting away if it does heat up. I have my ground up eggshells. I like giving them to the worms. It's a good source of grit for the worms. All those little specks when the worms go ahead and crawl over and eat them and then continue to crawl around, that actually helps to digest and break down the food because they have a crop and a gizzard. They don't have teeth. So that isn't one of the most important things, but it is something that I like to add. You can use the ground up eggshells in the garden and the compost pile, but I find I kind of kill two birds with one stone. If I add it here and then I add it, the castings into the garden later, basically the worms have had a chance to break down the eggshells to help release the calcium later into the garden. But as of right now, if you were just to sprinkle this in the garden, it wouldn't really help your calcium levels out at all. It needs time and the biology to actually break down the shell to release the calcium. So after I go ahead and have the feeding, I want to cover the food scraps, preferably with castings, bedding as well, but I like the castings going over top. To me, that helps. Let me tuck this comfrey leaf under a little bit better. Yes, so freezing the food scraps and then burying the food scraps help to eliminate some of the flying pests, fungus gnats, fruit flies. And then finally, what I like to do is I had expired oats, flour, cornmeal. I made a worm chow and I like to sprinkle that on top. Now I have to add more into my little dish. This is available for the worms right away. So as the worms start to squirm around, they can go ahead and start eating the worm chow right away, and that's available for them. The other items down below typically take a little bit of time, a few days to a week, to start breaking down enough for the worms to really want to go after it. And that's due to the bin biology and then other little critters that are in the bin to help break it down. I recently just had a question asked if somebody could use sweet potato noodles that were raw as a worm chow. You can. Point that I would caution against is feeding too much of it. Too much carbohydrates and sugars can actually be a detriment to your worms. So if you add it as like a light amendment, that should be fine. I wouldn't go ahead and just feed it sweet potato noodles all the time. They went ahead and asked a question, so I wanted to kind of answer it in the video, and then I'm going to also answer their question directly back in the comments. Okay, so the bin's looking great. I'm very pleased. This was the side that was up. I'm gonna flip it over so then this side can get moist with the bubble wrap. And what I'm gonna do is actually scrape some of that material. It's kind of dried up. Get some of that scraped back over this way. So then hopefully in the next week or so, I can harvest that material, and that's just going to sit in my castings tote until the spring when I'm ready to use them. So because it was so dry, I am going to cover everything back up again. Now, that being said, if I was to dig under here, this is all still moist. So I don't mind it drying out a little bit. However, you don't want your castings to dry out completely. Once again, thank you for all the new subscribers. If you haven't subscribed, think about subscribing. If you have any questions, make sure you drop them down in the comments. Thanks for coming along, checking out the video. Everybody have a great day.